Welcome to WTF Stories and Advice. I'm Caroline Cranshaw, hypnotherapist and professional shit talker. And today we have the beautiful, amazing Angelina Grey.
Oh, you're so lovely. I'm a professional shit talker too. That's all though.
I think you're even more of a professional shit talker than me, to be honest, which is saying something.
Yeah, weekdays, 3 hours a day.
Nice. So Angelina, if you haven't listened to previous podcasts with her, is an amazing radio host and, shall we say, radio personality.
All right, we'll go personality. A little bit of fun.
She's
on a station called Radio Hodaki, networked across New Zealand.
Yes.
For our American audiences who don't know.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about ADHD. And it might come as a massive surprise, but I am ADHD, technically ADD. I'm not the hyperactive, not normally. And so is Angelina.
Yeah, just discovered, well, I had a suspicion end of last year and finally took me so long to go and see someone to get diagnosed. But yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. I think more so on the moderate end, but apparently it's a bit spectrumy, to be fair, isn't it?
It is, definitely. I found out I was ADHD when I was 32 years old. I'm like, yeah, look at chicken. That's what we say in my family. And how I found out, which you have a similar story, is my daughter, when she was 3, so I would have been 31, bounced off the walls, basically. She was the most hyperactive child you have ever seen, and people would just stare at me in horror. Because they were like, we'd go to someone's house and she'd be ripping open all the drawers and dumping them out and going through everything. She would break every child lock ever. There was nothing this child could not get into. And so I started researching ADD and ADHD, and it said that it's genetic or that seems to be a big factor. And so I contacted this doctor and I said, I think I might have this, but not sure. And he sent me a test saying if you score over 20, you should come see me. And I scored a 60.
Oh, jeez.
I don't do anything by halves, just so you know. And it was really interesting because it just explained so much of my life and why I was the way I was, because I'm also mildly dyslexic. And I think it was completely missed. It was funny because my brother was diagnosed with it, but no one ever even thought with me because I could focus. If anything, I would hyper-focus. Like if I was interested in something, I would go down a 3-day wormhole into the internet and know everything about that topic. But, eat something, take a break. No, why would you do that? That's just boring. So no one thought I had a focus problem. But if it came to something that I didn't want to do, it was like pulling teeth. It was just impossible for me.
And it would be the last minute kind of thing that would get you going, would you say?
Yes. So give me a deadline and I will get it in by that deadline, but I will stay up all night the night before and not sleep and eat bags of candy and sugar because sugar was how I could focus.
Okay. But they do say that you tend to, if you don't know you've got it, you kind of self-medicate to whatever works to get you going, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is I tried cocaine. I know that's shocking, but I did, and it never did anything for me. I'd be like, what's the point of this? This is like really expensive for nothing.
Everyone's going crazy and having a great time. I'm a bit like, oh yeah, boring.
I could just go home and go to bed after doing coke. Like I just couldn't understand what the big deal was.
Why is it so expensive? What?
I know. What's so good about this? I just feel normal.
Well, see, my thing would be, I feel a little bit tired, actually. I might just have a little nap in the corner. And so that's the deal, though, when you take, so for people who take Ritalin, who need it, it doesn't make them bouncing off the walls or crazy, right? It lends them to be able to focus.
Yeah, exactly. So ADHD is really low dopamine. Now, I don't think this is the case, and we'll get into this because it's really interesting, and Angelina's been going down a really interesting path with hers, is I don't think it's always the case of low dopamine. But for most people, it is. And for most people with ADHD, it's also kind of a right brain dominance. So the right brain, which is that big picture, creative, and there's a whole bunch of pluses of having ADHD, but because people with it tend to be low dopamine is we'll seek out other ways. Sugar, sex, drugs, like shopping, porn, you name it. But they tend to have some impulse issues, let's just say, and can be very oppositional. I know for myself, the only way my parents could get me to do anything was tell me I couldn't do it.
Uh-huh.
And that still kind of applies today.
And then often big emotions, there can be anger issues, etc. too, right?
Yes, exactly. So for you, how did you figure it out?
Well, I was just going to say pretty much the same way that you did. I know that I've been to see you in the past and you've always suggested I've got low dopamine. And I didn't really, I never thought anything of it until my daughter turned 3. And it wasn't probably as excessive as yours bouncing off the walls. There's definitely some hyperactivity, but real sort of oppositional behavior, quite aggressive. But then moments of real empathy and sweetness and hyper-focus on things that you wouldn't expect a 3-year-old to do, and having things like all lined up perfectly in a row and a little bit of almost OCD behavior. And if God forbid we went the wrong route home, the way she expects is what she expects. Otherwise, chaos,
Yeah.
So my nanny, interestingly enough, she has a family history of it. And she said to me, look, just the way she's focusing, have you ever looked at ADHD? And I went, oh, okay, I'll look into that. And I started reading it for Elodie going, yes, hang on, wait a minute. This is like a book on my life. It was just crazy. But more, I think what they don't pick up with a lot of females and why it's been so missed in the past is that a lot of females are more inattentive ADHD. So rather than, as you said, the hyperactivity, it's just the inability to focus. And other ones that maybe got missed in school because they were too busy looking out the window and daydreaming on what they were supposed, instead of doing what they were supposed to be doing, which was me. And unless I loved something, like that's why I'm in radio. My psych said, look, you're in the perfect job because you love what you do. And so you can really focus and give it everything. Whereas, God, if I was in data entry, terrible. I tried that before. My God, I'd so nearly got fired a million times. Just, why can't you do it like everybody else? And that's what I had all my life. Like it's really validated me getting that diagnosis because all my life I just felt I was a little bit shit at everything. And why can't I do it the way they do? Why is my brain taking me down a totally different route? Why can't I just read instructions and not have my mind go insane,
Yeah.
So, and it's definitely my daughter, the impulse control thing, that is tricky to work on. And it's a little bit toddlerish too, right?
Yeah.
But I do find, although I've been known to be a bit of an introvert, I'll just say dumb stuff like, why did I say that? And just the shame of wanting to take stuff back that I've just impulsively blurted out, or thinking I'm being appropriate, but I'm really inappropriate at the wrong time, or it's supposed to be a sad moment and I burst out laughing, or, just that.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
My psych, who I think is your psych as well. We have the same psych, right?
I know, crazy. Yeah.
And when he was, because I was originally assessed by my doctor, and then the laws changed in New Zealand, so I had to be reassessed by a psychiatrist. And that was one of the things he said, are you a bit of a blurter? Do you say things without thinking? And I was like, no, not really. And he's like, well, I can think of 3 examples just in our conversation. And I was like, what? And he's like, you asked me about my book and you tried to engage me in like kind of an inappropriate conversation about when I was younger and blah, blah. And he just gave these examples. And I was like, well, that's not inappropriate. And he's like, well, to neurotypicals, yes, it is.
That's fascinating. And that's the other thing. I mean, in my head, it makes sense. But for neurotypicals, what did you just say? What are you doing and why? So
growing up, all the comments on all my reports were, Caroline just needs to talk less.
Or apply herself.
Yeah. Always apply herself, unless it was a class I was interested in. Then I was like A+ student or like a D student if I didn't like math.
Well, the frustrating, I just look back at so many missed opportunities, and I know that it wasn't really studied properly in females until like 5 years ago. But I think if it had been when I was a kid, how well I could have done in certain areas that I am interested in, but I just needed the right way to focus,
Oh, totally.
Like my nana, she was a concert pianist, and she said to me, you've got it in you, but you just need to apply yourself. And so I'd be sitting there playing rock songs instead of, I don't know, Clementi or Mozart or something.
Oh,
it's terrible.
I was the same.
Yeah.
I would play, if I really wanted to annoy my mother, I'd play Heart and Soul over and over and over. And she'd just be like, enough!
That's that one? Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, did that lots too.
Just to drive people crazy. Yeah, I took 6 years of piano lessons, and I think that's still the only song I can play.
Amazing.
What got me was my mother and my grandmother could play by ear.
Oh.
So they could just listen to something and sit down and play it and not even read music. And it was...
Well, that's how I got through doing 12 years of it. I couldn't read it. I just would listen and copy because my brain would be, I can't focus on that. I can't focus on those notes. What? So.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought we'd give us just a few little tips or actually we'll give you some stats, right? So 1 in 10 children in the States are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. It's all ADHD now, and then ADD is a subtype.
Okay.
Which really fucks me off. I don't like that because I'm not hyperactive.
Yeah, exactly. So ADD is essentially the non-hyperactive one.
Yeah, and it's interesting because boys are twice as likely to be diagnosed as girls. It's like something like 11% of boys are diagnosed and then something like 6% of girls. But they actually believe it's equal. Like they believe that there's the equal amount of people with it. And there's a lot of famous people with ADHD, like Jim Carrey. That's a big shock.
Yeah.
That one doesn't surprise me. Will Smith, Ryan Gosling, Emma Watson,
Richard Branson,
Michael Phelps, Michael Jordan, Will.i.am, Adam Levine, Justin Timberlake, Walt Disney. They think Mozart, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, Picasso, Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, Kurt Cobain. That's just to name a few.
Okay, but that explains it because our psych said you'll see a lot of people with ADHD in media or geniuses. They just need someone to tell them to clean up after themselves and go to the toilet and have a shower.
Yeah. So for me, it really was life-changing to take medication. And my doctor sat down and said, well, you have a low dopamine issue and medication will really help you. And that's what I advise more than anything else. And I was like, I don't want to take medication. It never works for me. And he said, well, if I said you had a low thyroid, would you refuse to take medication? And I was like, well, no, because I think I would lose weight. So I would take that. He was like, here's the thing. You'll know within an hour if it works for you or not. Yeah, you should know very quickly whether it works. And I thought, well, okay. Because I had tried all kinds of antidepressants and anti-anxiety, and they just always made me feel worse.
Yeah.
And feel like I was on drugs, like within hours, which people were like, oh, no, you shouldn't feel anything for like 3 or 4 weeks. And that it just didn't work like that for me. But what I realized was I wasn't low in serotonin. I was low in dopamine.
Boom.
And that my anxiety issues and my depression and all of that was because I was procrastinating and sabotaging my life and making really impulsive, poor decisions. And so I started taking the medication, and within an hour of taking it, it was like the clouds parted. And I remember sitting down and making a list of all the stuff I needed to do. And I got every single thing on that list done that day. And I remember my husband at the time was like, oh, you just want to be a desperate housewife and this is ridiculous. By the end of the day, he was like, oh, you're going to keep taking that, right? Like, that's amazing. What the hell? And that's when I went and studied hypnotherapy, and I could stick to things. And
wow.
It's like my whole life changed by taking Ritalin. Now, that's not the answer for everybody, though. For some people, it doesn't work. Tell us about your experience.
Well, that seems to be the case for me as well. Although, see, you told me how great it was. So I'm like, right, excellent. My life is going to change. I'll be able to juggle having kids and working and being a super mum. So in the end, I first tried it, and that day, I did feel a little bit like that, like, oh, hang on, everything's happening on time. I'm not racing to the clock, and I'm making lists and I'm getting stuff done. And I felt so much calmer. It slowed everything down a bit. But then subsequently, I only get that now every now and then. And it ended up making me feel facey and all over the shop and not able to focus, and it exacerbated my issues. So I'm assuming, look, if I didn't have it, I'd be speedy on Ritalin, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's obviously I do need some form of it. And it's either a case of me trying to find the right kind, because you do have to try several different types, obviously, or it's maybe I need to, I don't know, change up my diet. They say there could be something in my gut that might help it work. So I need to maybe try a few other things before that might be the breakthrough case for me. Although you were telling me about some medication you can get prescribed from just the doctor.
They used to call it Wellbutrin, or maybe it's still called Wellbutrin. And it also used to be called Zyban.
Zyban, that's the one.
It is an antidepressant, but it does boost dopamine as well as serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would prescribe it for people trying to quit smoking.
Uh-huh.
And I think people with ADHD do have a tendency to get addicted to nicotine and stimulants. Like I used to have 5-6 coffees a day, easy.
Yep.
Could have a coffee and go to bed at night.
Yeah.
And
totally.
Not the case anymore.
If I had too much caffeine, I would get sleepy. It was just bizarre.
Exactly. So I think it's interesting how it's a different type of brain. But I also really believe for some people, it may not be a low dopamine issue, that it may be a gut health issue, that they may have neuroinflammation and bacteria that's causing brain fog. And so, because you were saying that you've gone to a naturopath and you're going to go down that route.
Yeah, one that specializes, well, especially for my daughter, because she's only 3, so I'm not going to put her on medication.
No.
But it appears she's showing all the signs of ADHD and the hyperactive kind, besides not focusing. And the naturopath's amazing. She's really helped. She said, high-dose fish oil will help. And I am seeing an improvement with magnesium and sleeping, but there are all sorts of gut inflammation things that she's thinking we need to go down that route and see whether a really good probiotic for her will work. There's also something else, I can't think what the name of it is now, but it's a reaction to certain foods that kicks off stuff in the gut that can cause hyperactivity, aggression, bad sleeping, and itching too, which she has all of those. So we're going to go down the food route as well and see if we can change a few things. And they say that with some people, gluten can really exacerbate the ADHD symptoms.
Definitely.
So, I do think you can do the natural route as well, because diet, God, it plays a massive part with your microbiome and your gut and everything, and just how your gut affects your brain that we're only just learning about in the last few years,
It's huge. And that was the route I took with my daughter as well. So she's never been medicated for ADHD.
Wow.
And took her to a great naturopath who did kinesiology. And this woman is the one who ended up teaching me kinesiology and this herbal formulation. And she really did improve hugely. But the other thing that was interesting is she would be a little terror at home, right? Because this was not a child who could play by herself. She needed to always be entertained and interacting. And whereas my younger one could just sit and play very happily for like 2 hours by herself.
Same.
Whereas the older one was, no. It's good you get the harder child first.
Yeah.
And I love you, Scarlett. I'm not saying that. But I think I had several friends who had their first child be the easiest, most placid babies. And they would just look at me and go, oh, yeah, obviously I haven't sleep trained her. And your routine's not, it's this, it's that. And then they would have a second child that was a nightmare. And I'd be like, oh, you obviously haven't done this and that. And they'd just be like, shut up, bitch. Okay, I get
it. That's the thing. Yeah, I totally hear you. Did you find that Scarlett worked better with her routine?
Yes, definitely worked better with her routine. But what was interesting was she then started school at 5, and she was an angel at school. Yes. Every parent-teacher meeting, it was like, oh, she's just such a joy to have in the class and always participating and so well-behaved. And we'd be like, okay, no, you obviously have the wrong child. And they'd be like, no, Scarlett. And we would just sit there with our mouths hanging open because we could not believe that this was the same kid.
Yeah, I'm getting the same. I go to kindy and Elodie's sitting down on the mat and listening and coming home and telling me all the stuff that she's been participating in and like listening to what teachers say. So is it that they concentrate really hard when they're there and then they lose the plot when they're at home?
Possibly, but I think they're getting a lot of mental stimulation, right? And they're around others, and I think so. I think peer pressure probably had something to do with it.
Yep.
She would love to come home and tell me all about the other naughty, especially boys in her class, and it was just interesting. So we never had the need to medicate her. And it's interesting now, she's 19, and she's at university, and she's studying psychology, and she is now asking if she can be diagnosed and look at trying the medication because she's having a hard time focusing.
Okay.
And her father ended up getting diagnosed with it as well. So she's got 2 parents with it.
Well, I think Elodie has 2 parents with it too. So they say, I was actually reading that ADHD people often find themselves, it's like a little tribe. They gravitate towards others that maybe that understand them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, because like you'll start one conversation and then you'll do another. And like, I couldn't stand it when people came over to my house because I could not sit still. I couldn't just sit and hang out with somebody. I'd have to be cleaning the kitchen while I did it. And did you want some food? And da-da-da. And here, let's look in here and let me start a new project while I'm talking to you. And it would probably drive people insane.
Yeah.
But if I went to someone else's house, I could sit and not be a crazy person. But I always can spot when people have ADD or ADHD. I get so many clients that they'll come to me for procrastination or weight issues. And really what their issue is that they're ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I do recommend starting the natural route first and looking at your gut bacteria and taking some supplements that have hugely helped me and I take to this day. And I started giving these to my daughter, which that was what seemed to really help, was something called L-Tyrosine.
Yes, I've been doing that. That really helps. Yeah.
Yes, it's a precursor to dopamine, and it's also a precursor to thyroid hormone, so it's good for your metabolism and mental clarity. L-phenylalanine is another one. So L-phenylalanine is also a precursor to dopamine. It's actually a precursor to tyrosine, but it is a good mood booster, and that helps with focus. Another one I have my kids take and I take and my clients is something called Inocetone. Inocetone is a B vitamin that boosts dopamine, GABA, and serotonin. So it makes you feel calm, clear, and focused, and it helps you make the other neurotransmitters. So if you think you've got ADHD, I would definitely start with those, and I'll put this into the show notes. But B complex and zinc as well. And some of it is just we're malnutritioned.
Okay.
So I think I wouldn't start with medication, but I would start looking at it and possibly getting a diagnosis if you think it applies. I'm going to add some links of tests that you can do, but it's so interesting, the whole topic.
The best website that I found actually and got so much information from was the Attitude website. Have you seen that? It's addatude.com. Yeah. So that's got loads of checklists and tests, etc.
On that note, I thought we would read a questioner.
A listener's question?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, we get some great questions sent to us. And so this one I thought would be a good one to start with, and something that I think you could definitely give some advice on as well. Okay. Hi, Caroline. Love the podcast. Think you give great advice. So I'm hoping you can help me with what feels like an impossible situation. My wife and I have been together for 7 years, and she has a 12-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son from a previous relationship. When we first got together, they were both still in her bed, but they were still little, and I worked nights. I wasn't comfortable with it, but it would always turn into a huge drama if I tried to put my foot down. Last year, I seriously hurt my back, so I bought a really good mattress. Otherwise, I'm in agony. I thought by now both kids would have grown out of sleeping with their mom, but they haven't. It's now become a nightmare to sleep in a bed with two kids, especially because they're ninjas and are kicking and talking throughout the night. Plus, we have a snoring bulldog who the kids also insist sleep in the bed. We occasionally get them to sleep in their own rooms, but very rarely, as they have meltdowns when we try to put them in their own bed, and my wife always gives in. She doesn't believe we should force them out and feels like we're traumatizing them, which I do understand. But I'm sick of sleeping in a crappy kid's bed when they're all sleeping on my very expensive, comfy mattress. Not to mention our sex life is non-existent. It was always planned we would have a child, as I always wanted a big family, but we never have the chance to have sex, and the thought of another kid in our bed terrifies me. A few days ago, I lost it. My back was killing me, and I was exhausted. I told her to take the kids and the fucking dog and go sleep in one of the kids' rooms. It wasn't my finest moment, and I've apologized for my behavior. We didn't really get to discuss it because the kids got upset and started crying. She took the kids to her parents for the night, and when she got home, she calmly explained that they wouldn't all fit in one of the kids' beds. She agreed I could have the big bed for now, but is ordering a memory foam topper for our son's bed so I can sleep there comfortably. I don't want to sleep in a fucking kid's bed. I want my bed, and I'd really like to spend a night in bed with my wife without an audience. Her parents are on her and the kid's side, but I don't think I should have to give my bed up for them. I'm not trying to be a dick, but I've paid a lot of money for it. The issue is getting worse, and my in-laws are now calling me abusive for trying to separate the kids from their mother. Their father lives in another state and only sees them once a year, if that, for a day or two, and pays no child support. So I've been supporting all three of them pretty much since we met. We never get a break, and I feel like my needs are her last priority. How do I get my wife to understand why this isn't okay and get the kids to sleep in their own bed? On a side note, both kids have been diagnosed with ADHD and mild autism, which is why my wife says the kids can't sleep in a row. So I thought this question would be good because we are talking about ADHD.
Yeah. And I can relate a little bit too. So yeah, that's really hard. I think, look, my first thought is that, look, it's his bed, so he should choose if he wants to sleep in it. He should be able to. And if they need a bigger bed, then chuck them all in a bigger bed somewhere else. And then he can invite the wife for visits if she gets a moment in between the children.
I think this guy is a fucking saint.
Oh, same. I think he's being really, really understanding and totally gets it. And fair call.
7 years of sleeping with 2 kids that aren't biological. Yeah. And that he's been supporting.
Yeah.
And I think that the kids are 100% old enough to start sleeping in their own bed. I think it should have been done when she got together with him. And I understand, like, believe me, I kind of co-slept with my babies in the beginning because I didn't want them to sleep away from me, which a lot of people frowned on. But as time goes on, you can't, unless everybody's happy with it. I know couples that they're still co-sleeping with their kids at that age, and everyone's fine with it. But, on the side, the husband's not that great about it because they normally don't have sex. When are you going to have sex when you got 2 kids in your bed? Yeah,
that's when everyone goes to bed and you utilize other areas of the house. The couch. My initial thought, though, was what happened with the children maybe in the past with the breakup with his partner and her ex. Was there some trauma there? And is that why the kids are so needing their mum so much? And maybe do they need a little bit of help and some work in order for them to learn to sleep in their own beds?
I agree. There probably is some trauma there. But I had this issue when my daughter was 7. She developed anxiety and she just would scream the house down. Mm-hmm. And so I took her to a naturopath and a psychologist. And I did all this stuff. And she eventually got over it. What she had was pandas. That's a whole nother topic you should check out with his to do with OCD and children. Fascinating topic. But I persevered because if I hadn't insisted, she'd still be sleeping with me. Well, she's gone to university now, but she would have slept with me the whole time.
Do you reckon? Because my mum's always like, oh, they won't still be sleeping with you when they're 15. Just it's fine.
I know people who still have their 15-year-old, and this is a single mother, who's her 15 and 17-year-old kids still sleep with her every night. So,
wow.
and that's all good if everybody's happy with it. But my advice would be go to a therapist. Mm-hmm. Go to a family therapist. What I would do is call a few, tell them what the situation is. If they seem to be taking your wife's side, don't go to that therapist, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to get a therapist who's like really into co-sleeping and doesn't want to have sex with her husband either.
Yep.
Making that assumption. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But get a good therapist who can help your wife to see that it is time to get the kids out of your bed and to work with them and to have the kids get some therapy.
My other thought is, okay, so if they're not sleeping really together, if they're not able to be intimate together, and he's been supporting them the whole time, is she just using you? Is she like, hey, this is cushy. It's a good buffer for her. Maybe she's got some intimacy issues and is using the kiddies as her safety net.
That's such a good point.
Just a thought.
Boom. Yeah.
No offense. Hopefully that's not I don't want to slap you in the face with a wet fish, but hey.
Well, yeah. And so, I mean, is she open to being intimate in other times? Does she make an effort with that? And is this really the relationship you want? I think that's what you need because it doesn't sound like your needs are being prioritized. And I mean, we're obviously just getting a snapshot. But go to therapy. Yeah, I think there are a few other issues maybe at play rather than just the kids need to sleep with me. And they're scared because it could be a whole raft of stuff. Definitely. Okay, well, we have another one.
All right.
So, well, hopefully that helps and write to us again and give us an update.
And look, I'm just a lady on the internet, so, take it with a grain of salt. You're the therapist, Caroline.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I'm just mad I didn't think of it first.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, that was spot on advice, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your next calling, therapist. Okay, now this one is a doozy. How do I deal with and explain to people that I don't want my mother to see my children anymore? My husband and I adopted a gorgeous baby girl 4 years ago. We weren't even trying to get pregnant yet. I've always known that I was meant to adopt a child, and when the opportunity came up, I took it. My daughter's 17-year-old mother was a smart, beautiful girl, but was the daughter of drug addicts and wasn't ready to raise a baby, but couldn't bring herself to have an abortion. We knew her as she was the girlfriend of my husband's 17-year-old nephew. My husband and I just knew we were meant to raise this baby and did an open adoption, which has worked out great for everyone. Maya arrived, bringing so much love to our family and is honestly a ray of light. She is a stunning biracial child, as her mother is black and father is white, and everyone tells me we should get her into commercials and modeling. She is that beautiful and has the most loving nature. I am so proud to be one of her mothers, and adopting her is the best thing I've ever done. And my husband just adores her. This gives me goosebumps. Like,
I actually
wow.
brought tears to my eyes. That's
I know.
So gorgeous.
I'm getting tear. Oh.
Yeah.
Just wait. I bawled my eyes out with this letter. Although some relatives were against it at first, they soon saw how incredible she is, and everyone has fallen in love with her. Everyone except my mother. She has never asked to hold my daughter and never gave the love she gave to my brother and sister's children. They are always spending the weekend at Granny's house, and she is always hugging and kissing them. My daughter has never been invited, and she basically ignores her when she's around. She's always posting photos of her other grandchildren, but has never even liked one of my posts of my daughter. At first, I thought it was because of me. We have always fought when I was growing up, and she was super controlling. I would confront her about it, and she would just deny it, but everyone can see it. A year after we adopted, I found out I was pregnant. My mother was so delighted with this pregnancy, she gave us all new baby gear. My son was born, and surprise, surprise, my mother adores him. Now, my first daughter is 4 years old, and the youngest is 2. My mother shows up every week to see her biological grandson, but she never talks or pays attention to my daughter. My daughter knows that her grandmother does not like her. She stays at the house of relatives and my friends without complaining, but the one time she went to my mom's for the afternoon, when I was desperate to get my hair done and my childcare fell through, I got a call to pick her up because she kept crying the whole time. When I went to get the kids, she seemed almost catatonic. She had been crying so hard. My 4-year-old nephew asked me what an N-word was and said that's why my daughter was crying. Granny was calling her that, and he didn't think it was very nice. Can you fucking believe this? When I confronted my mother, she was in bed with a migraine and told me I was selfish for asking her to look after my kids when she already had my nephew and screamed at me to get out. I am actually done with her and I don't ever want to see her again. I've realized my mother is a horrible racist and can't believe she'd be so cruel to a child. My daughter, her grandchild, because of the color of their skin. My husband thinks we shouldn't let my mother see her until she learns more about racism, acknowledges she's prejudiced, and apologizes, but I'm done. I don't want her to see my son either. I can't leave my little girl feeling rejected by her own grandmother while watching her brother being spoiled. Many relatives are calling me insensitive for not letting a grandmother see her grandson, and my mother is even threatening to sue me for visitation rights. What the fuck, Caroline? Am I a total bitch for not wanting to spend time with a narcissistic sociopath even though she's my mother? And is it possible she could ever change? I would never forgive myself if she continued to hurt my baby girl.
Yeah. I'm 100% behind you, girl. 100% behind you. Totally.
That is unbelievable. I just was like, I'm right now just covered in goosebumps and just simmering with indignity.
You know, the first thing that came into my mind was that her mother potentially has something like borderline personality disorder, because you always have the golden child or somebody's always the black sheep.
Yeah.
It's just you find the weakest link and they're the black sheep and they get that kind of treatment always. And I've had experience with this. I know exactly what it's like, and it sounds 100% that, and they will never take ownership. It's really hard to get borderline personality sufferers, I don't know, what do you call them, to therapy because they deny it, right? Is that your experience, Caroline?
I mean, I have some friends with borderline who got the right help. They got what they call dialectic therapy. And for some people, they really can change. Great. But it has to come from them. Mm-hmm. My grandmother and my great-grandmother were both borderline. Mm-hmm. And it is exactly that. There was always the golden child,
Yep.
and there was always the piece of shit.
And that person grows up thinking they are that piece of shit. You know what I mean? And it's freaking, it's really hard.
Is there a chance your mother could change? Probably not.
Doesn't sound like it. Doesn't sound like it to me. And it sounds like she's talking to other relatives, and that, you know what I mean? If the other relatives saying, "What? How could you do this?" I think they've been listening to the bleeding heart story from the mum, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be being manipulated.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have 100% no tolerance for racism. Maybe this is an opportunity for this woman to change and to learn, but I think I wouldn't be going anywhere near her for at least a year or two. And after evidence of extensive therapy and extensive apologies, I mean, the fact that she's threatening to sue you for visitation rights, obviously not for one child.
Yeah, listen, that's what drives me mad is you cannot, it's just causing that separation even more and making your daughter feel like she's other. And anyone that did that to my kid, they would not be allowed anywhere near them.
They wouldn't be alive.
No, that's it, because she's your freaking daughter. Yeah, yeah.
And it sounds like she's amazing.
And it sounds,
this little girl.
but it sounds like also it is a control thing. You know, if she said that the mum, she grew up with a controlling mother, she can't quite put her control on this child, maybe because she feels she's not biologically hers, or that's what it sounds like to me as well.
Yeah. So I'd say cut her off.
Yeah.
Cut that bitch off. Write a letter explaining why and the damage that she's done. So what movies could help educate her? I don't know. But don't feel bad. I think the most empowering thing you can do is cut off people who are toxic to your life. And if that is your blood, then that's just the way it is.
Or, some very extensive therapy between the two of you talking about why, and maybe if you can understand, maybe there's some trauma in her life that's caused her to be like this, and maybe you can come to an understanding, but she needs to know that it's just not acceptable.
No.
But it sounds like she may not listen.
Anyone who could call a child that, their own grandchild. The thing is that you can tell this woman doesn't see this child as her grandchild.
No. But the fact she's so little, she's 4, and she's being catatonically crying.
Because she's been calling the N-word. Like, oh my God.
I didn't
Where
hear
does
that.
she live?
I didn't hear that you said the N-word. Oh.
Did you not hear that?
No, that must have cut out of the Zoom thing. Oh, that gives me okay, that changes everything.
Oh my God. Yeah, no. That she was catatonically crying, and the nephew comes up and is like, what's an N-word? Because that's why she's crying.
Oh my
and that
God.
She kept calling her that, and he didn't think that was very nice. But it sounds like he didn't know what that meant.
Oh, that destroys me. That is.
Can you imagine? Could you imagine? And I think you are a sociopath if you actually could do that and not have the empathy.
And to a little gorgeous Bubba.
I know. Just disgusting.
To anyone, but Jesus.
To anybody, but that's the next level crazy shit. So now chop that bitch out like a cancer. That's my advice.
No way. It sounds like what an amazing mum though. Just with your 2 kids. That's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous and beautiful, and I think she's a fucking saint.
Yeah.
You are a saint.
Yeah, you're awesome.
And just keep doing you. And I have advised a lot of people to cut out family members. I've cut out family members, and I don't regret it for a second. And I know people think I am a cruel bitch for doing it, but it's what I had to do to keep myself safe.
Yeah.
And to make a point of like, some behavior is not okay.
Boundaries, man.
Boundaries. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think when you grow up with someone who doesn't allow you to have boundaries, it's really hard to start establishing them.
I agree.
So get some therapy, get some support in this, and keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you are really doing a good job. And just your mother's shown who she really is. And there's maybe a 1% chance she could actually change. And I wouldn't say 100% no, she can't change. You never know. Maybe losing access to her daughter and her grandchildren will be a wake-up call for her. But
it's for your mum. It's a privilege to have grandchildren. It's not a right. I believe. It's not a right. You do not own that child. It's not your property. It's not... How can you sue for something that's not yours?
Such a good point. That's right.
Yeah, that's my call.
Yeah. So, well, I'm just so sorry that you've been going through that, and I hope that advice helps. But yeah, we support you 100%.
Totally. Jeez.
And anyone who doesn't, they don't get it. So
They're fucktards.
exactly.
I'm allowed to say that, right? Oh, no, maybe not. Okay.
Oh, well, on my fucking podcast you are. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I couldn't have a podcast where I didn't swear. It'd be torturous for me. So that's just that's a bit of a downer now. We need something upbeat. Okay. Have you been watching anything good lately?
The last thing I watched in full was White Lotus. Have you seen that?
Oh, yes. So good. Loved it.
It was my mum who said, just wait till you get to this one scene. And I went like, what scene? She goes, you'll know it. Just text me when you get it. And I'm like, what? Then I text her going, Mum. It's like 75. Like, what are you doing? It was brilliant.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I watched
that was hilarious.
Clickbait recently. That was all right.
Oh, I actually watched a great, if you're into music or even not, a great drumming documentary called Count Me In. That was really cool with, obviously, Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones has just died, so they talked about him, Keith Moon from The Who, and a whole lot of famous drummers. And it really made you want to pick up some drumsticks and start tapping away. I reckon half of those guys are ADD, though, because they can't stop.
Oh,
always.
So true. I think so many musicians.
And the focus that it takes.
Yeah.
Because they were like getting into drums pre-Google, YouTubing how to do things when buying a kit was so expensive. They just had to bang on pots and pans. So
wow.
It's a way to get it out when you can't stop moving.
Oh, I'll have to definitely check that out.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Clickbait was meh. I don't know.
I started watching... because we're currently where we are in level 4 lockdown and can't really get out. So started on Amazon Prime, The Boys. Have you ever watched anything of that?
No. What's
that? It's got a couple of famous Kiwis in it, actually. It's this weird kind of superhero world, and I'm not into superheroes at all, but their take on it is quite interesting. They're superheroes, but they're arseholes, basically. And it's got, if you know the show Outrageous Fortune, it's got one of the main stars from that, Anthony Starr, Carlo Barn, who's another famous Kiwi actor, and... yeah, it's interesting. A lot of profanity and a lot of blood and explosions. So, yeah, I'll see how it goes. I'm into episode 2. It was intriguing, though. I'm not a superstar hero type of gal. I don't watch those movies, but, yeah, it was interesting.
No, I don't either. Every now and then, things like Hitch? No, that's the dating one. God, here's my ADD. What was the one with Will Smith? I did like that superhero one, maybe because he was like...
was it Hitch?
Hancock.
Oh.
Hancock?
Okay. I don't know the one.
I could totally have that wrong. But that one I did like. Yeah, now and then I can get into
now and then, yeah.
Superhero. But I'm just not one really for fantasy either.
I've been reading a book, but, with my ADD, it's all over the place. The last one I started reading is it called Unwinding? Maybe it's Unwinding Anxiety by Dr. Judson Brewer. Have you heard of that guy?
No, I haven't.
He's quite interesting. I'm not a super anxious person, but every now and then I just, things happen, lockdowns happen, and you start going, He talks about it from quite an interesting point of view, like, back in the olden days, cavemen days or what have you, your main things you need to look for, you'd come into a new place and you'd need food, water, place to sleep, all that kind of thing. And that fight or flight response he kind of talks about sometimes just came from they needed to find water, And the tip was, the one tip that I've taken away thus far is sometimes you might just be thirsty. So before, when you start getting anxious and freaking out, it's like a body response to your basic needs. There you go, drinking your water.
I'm drinking my water now.
And it's made me think, I don't drink enough water. Maybe that's part of it. So, yeah, but he's interesting. He talks about, there's another book of his as well on addiction, and it's that dopamine thing again, just people craving things, whether it's love or... So he's an interesting guy, Dr. Judson Brewer, a neuroscientist, I think he is, and psychologist.
Wow. Oh, I'll definitely have to check that out.
I thought you'd be into it. Yeah, you might be into it, I think.
Yeah, because I work with tons of people with anxiety, and I teach hypnotherapy, and a big part of that is how to work with anxiety. And I've really moved so much towards working with the nervous system and releasing trauma from the body and resetting the vagus nerve. And people they get a bit funny when they first come for a session with me, and they're coming for anxiety, and I'm like going through their neurotransmitters and telling them to do these certain exercises and allowing your body to shake to get it out. There's something called TRE, which is amazing for that, where you just do these exercises and your body starts to shake, and it really helps reset the nervous system and calm you down.
Wow.
But they're going, but I thought you were just going to hypnotize me to get over it. And I'm like, don't worry, hon, I'm going to do that too. But if I just did that, you wouldn't get over your anxiety completely, or it would take a while. Whereas you want to hit it from every angle. And I think that's really where psychology is going with anxiety now, which is fantastic, because I think people are going to get such a better result. But it is so much, we have these things happen and our nervous system just goes from 0 to 100. And it's like everything's a threat these days. Yeah, like we are in New Zealand in level 4 lockdown. And what that means is you can leave the house to go to the grocery store, the pharmacy, or the doctor. Yeah, or an essential worker, and that's it.
Or if I'm currently at work, so I'm an essential worker. Apparently, radio's essential.
Yeah.
Who knew? So I can go to work, but my husband can't. So husband's learning how to be a house husband, and he's finding that tricky.
I bet he is. I think that's so good for every parent who doesn't stay home with kids to have that opportunity to see what that's like, because they never really get it until they've had that experience. So I'm really happy that he's having that experience and hope he's enjoying it.
He's doing a pretty good job. The house is usually pretty clean when I get home, which is more than I could say for myself. So,
yeah, I think I know, like with my first husband, when I finally started training hypnotherapy and I put my foot down and be like, you are going to look after the kids for a day. And I would get home and the house would be spotless and dinner would be on the stove and everything. And he'd be like, see, it's not that hard. And immediately sit down on the couch and fall asleep. Yeah. And be passed out. So I could tell he was literally working his ass off all day to prove that it was not that hard. But he certainly lightened up after that. I'll tell you that.
How hilarious.
Well, I think that's us for today. Is there anything else you want to share or say?
No, it's just really nice to see a friendly face, being that I've hardly seen anyone for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
I know. It's crazy. We got put into level 4 with 1 case of COVID in New Zealand.
But then it turned out, actually, we didn't realize there were quite a few hundred cases circulating.
Yeah, so immediately put into that within the announcement was made on a Tuesday afternoon, and by midnight, the rules were in place, and you had to wear a mask everywhere you go. And we just are crazy here with how strict we get about it. But now I think it's 800 or 900 cases or something.
Yeah, so I think they knew that one case meant there was way more than one. That was just the surface of what we were seeing. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yes, it is. And what I find interesting is a lot of countries are really taking we just have to learn to live with this.
I do know that I think for us, we just don't have the infrastructure to be able to deal with an influx of sick people, because then all the other sick people are going to miss out on hospital beds and operations. And so
we have one of the lowest per capita in the Western world of ICU beds.
Yeah, so that needs to change.
That really needs to change, because even now I'm hearing stories of people not being able to get medical treatment.
Yeah.
So I think, and the government pays people wages. They have something called the Wage Subsidy. And so what about, instead of doing this, paying everyone's wages and making them all stay home, we build a new hospital completely for COVID? I don't know.
Well, the thing is with the wage subsidy, don't they say that it only takes 7 changes of hands before that money goes back to the government? So really they're not.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, after talking to a few accountants, if you give money to people, it circulates back.
They spend it.
After, 7 changes of hands.
Oh, that's fascinating. Interesting.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of this.
We will see. We will. But they're getting everyone vaccinated. I saw you got vaccinated recently.
Yeah, I did, actually. I felt I got a bit tired for maybe 24 hours afterwards, but feeling fine now.
Oh, good.
So
have you had the second shot, or?
Nah, I wait for I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks or something.
Oh, cool. So that's good.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
I have anaphylaxis.
You can't, hey?
Yeah, I've had several anaphylactic reactions to vaccines,
Yeah.
and I have epilepsy, anaphylactic allergies. So I am very, very nervous about getting that
Well,
vaccine.
do you have to? Because you'd be a case for sitting it out then.
Yeah, I definitely get a medical exemption. But
Yeah.
what I'm really afraid of, because they're talking about bringing the vaccine passports here, is
Right.
am I going to get excluded because I have a genuine health issue?
I don't think that's the case. I think if you do,
I hope not.
You'd have documentation to say why.
Yeah, and it's not that I'm an anti-masker, an anti-vaxxer. It's
No.
But what gets me is that I see so many people posting stuff about people just need to get fucking vaccinated and and these real rants about it. And I think you need to think about
Very polarizing.
it is.
And some people can't.
Some people can't. And you need to think about that before you do a big rant. And I think that medical choice is important. And I support anyone's right to get vaccinated. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, I think there needs to be more open discussion about the fact, and I'm seeing lots of people through Zoom who have a massive anxiety around getting injections. And so they're literally like, they keep trying to go and they're having panic attacks and meltdowns. And so I just want to say, be kind, people. Like, think about the fact that there are people like me or people with anxiety disorders or health issues that can't do it. And so, I don't know. We're not all trying to be assholes. I don't think there's nanobots that are going to make 5G, turn me into an antenna. I don't think the government is trying to kill everybody with this vaccine, because why would they kill all the people who follow the rules? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, it won't make them any money, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm figuring, if there was 5G involved with the vaccine, then I definitely would have been able to get this computer to work before we started recording. So that proves...
Exactly. Your internet would have been a lot better.
Way better.
Yeah. Cool. All right, hon. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And that's us for today. If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe and share it with your friends. And keep sending your questions and stories. I just really enjoy them. And I've got some really cool ones coming up. But I just really appreciate you as the listeners and want to thank you for sharing your struggles and issues in life. And I think when we can be there for each other, it just makes all the difference. All right. Bye.